Hello, my name is Harry Colbert Jr., and I am the Vice President of Programming and Editorial at the Center for Broadcast Journalism and Power 104.7 FM, online power1047.fm. I have some brilliant guests with me. I'll introduce them in order from my left on down. Alex Leonard. Alex Leonard is a somatic abolitionist practitioner, licensed school counselor, certified to conceal and carry instructor, and co-founder of Ujima Collective. Leslie Redmond is a lawyer, former NAACP Minneapolis president, and founder of Don't Complain, Activate. And Dr. Yohuru Williams is a distinguished university chair and professor of history and the founding director of the Racial Justice Initiative at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul. Thank you all for joining.
Thank you.
Dr. Williams, I think we're going to start with you because you're a professor of history and we need to understand how we got to this moment. So, and I know that that's a broad question, but how did we get here? How do we arrive right now?
It's a broad question. It's an important question in the context of understanding this as being bigger than Donald Trump. And it goes back really to the founding, this idea of what this republic was intended to be. It starts out with this kind of noble language that speaks to these principles that the nation very rarely has lived up to, but they've animated the nation in such a way that we fought a civil war and Reconstruction to make those values real. In the midst of that Civil War and Reconstruction, we got three important constitutional amendments, a 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment is often called the Revolution of 1868 because it does some things that are very important. It establishes citizenship. It creates this expectation of due process of law, talks about privileges and immunities. So it's very important, and it held the federal government accountable. The states accountable in the same way that the federal government was accountable by the Bill of Rights. Why is that all important? Trump is elected for the second time, articulating a platform of white supremacy, which by its very nature then is this assault on the foundations of birthright citizenship. That's the reason that's been part of that conversation. But it's also an important foundation for constitutional policing. Why is that important? Let's go back to 2020 and the murder of George Floyd. Minnesota Department of Human Rights negotiates a consent decree around race-based policing. The federal government comes in and it's supposed to negotiate a consent decree around constitutional policing, making sure municipal departments, in this case Minneapolis, is going to follow and abide by the US Constitution. Trump 2.0 comes in, and last year we saw the administration very quickly move to distance itself away from accountability and policing to support Trump's agenda. So we saw both an assault on birthright citizenship by the Trump administration, and then we saw Trump in April issuing an executive order saying we need to take the handcuffs off the police, strengthening policing. A week later, less than a week later, the federal government pulls out of the proposed consent decree on constitutional policing with the city of Minneapolis. A month later, we see the deployment of ICE agents in Los Angeles. In August, we see the deployment of the National Guard in the District of Columbia. In September, we have Hegseth and Trump at a meeting with military commanders and the President of the United States saying American cities might possibly be training grounds or could be training grounds for the military. And then by December, you get Operation Metro Surge here in the Twin Cities. Just to kind of put a cap on this so people understand this, I believe from the very beginning, Minneapolis, St. Paul, the Twin Cities, Minnesota was a target. And that's because of the legacy of what happened here in 2020. It's because you had Governor Walz run against him. It's because the president was looking for a small enough city where you could have this massive deployment, where it's like political theater. And this is all intended to create a chilling effect, not just here in Minnesota, but nationally.
So, and Leslie and Alex, I'll ask you to jump in as well and answer some of this question if you'd like to. But what you did was center the conversations where I want to make some acknowledgments. You brought up Brother George Perry Floyd. We are steps away as we are taping this program from where Alex Preddy was killed this past Saturday. You had Renee Good killed January 7th. You've had Philando Castile, Dante Wright, Jamar Clark, Amir Locke, who the anniversary of his killing will be this coming Monday. And so many countless others. And I bring up their legacy because, and later on in the conversation we can talk about this, had we done right by them in that moment, maybe we don't find ourselves in this moment. Mm-hmm. So Alex, Leslie, would you all like to talk about how you think we got here? How do we end up in this perilous predicament?
I can kick us off, and then I'll pass it to our brother Alex. You know, we got to go all the way back to our indigenous brothers and sisters and the 38 indigenous men who were hung, right, at the orders of Abraham Lincoln, wasn't that?
That's right.
Okay, got to ask
right.
the story and make sure I'm right I'm on the right path. Because, and then actually I was talking to some of our indigenous brothers and sisters at a healing circle I had not too long ago, and they talked about the patrolling that had to take place, specifically because a lot of time, again, we're talking about the men, but we know the women were targeted as well, and they weren't always killed, but they were violated, right, in many different ways and abused. And so this is a long history, right? Like, we can't even just start with the Black and brown people who are being killed, because, again, we know Brother George Floyd, you know, when I was even, when I saw Renee Nicole Good be killed in her car, I did think about Philando Castile, and, you know, Mama Valerie Castile is working on his commemoration, you know, for this summer. It's been 10 years. You know, we just had the Day of Remembrance for Brother George Floyd. 5 years, Jamar Clark, 10-year remembrance. And again, when I saw Alex laying on that ground being killed, that was Jamar Clark, right? In 2015, laying in North Minneapolis being killed. And again, we have been screaming to the top of our lungs about, you have to do something. Something has to change, right? In 2020, I said, Black Minnesota, we are done dying. White Minnesota, you are done hiding. Your white Wakanda has been discovered, and it's time for Black people's humanity to be recognized. And I didn't even know what I was saying, Dr. Yohuru, back then, right? I didn't realize that we were going to come to a day where white people were being killed in the daylight. I was the vice president for the Minneapolis NAACP when Justine DeMond was killed in 2017, a white woman from South Minneapolis. And you all remember the outrage. You all remember how justice was swift. It is troubling right now to see that even when as white people, we're not even seeing quick justice. We're seeing them be dehumanized like we've been dehumanized, right? And this is what MLK was warning us about, recognizing that our humanity is all intertwined. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? And so that's what we are witnessing right now. What we are witnessing right now is when you perpetuate the crime and the injustice, and really when you talk about the doctrine of white supremacy, right, that has been polluting on American soil for such a long time, it's like the rooster has come home to crow. And this is what we're witnessing right now.
Yeah, Brother Malcolm said it, and it was controversial then, but it was also prophetic, clearly.
I won't add too much other than keeping it very local. Just for context in terms of like why here, why the resistance is so strong. Leslie touched on some of it, going back to 2015. This goes back to 2000, right? You go back to 2000 in this city, you're talking about 200 bodies, right? From Minneapolis Police Department or from Minnesota Police, right? I can name Courtney Williams, 15-year-old, gunned down in Northeast Minneapolis. Walter Collins Jr., South Minneapolis, Fong Lee, right? Like these are all, and it's affected all of the communities, right? And that's why the powder keg here. That's why the lid blew off here, right? It's been going on. We've been resisting, and I want to add, we've won a lot of things, right? Like I know what policing looked like in the early 2000s. Wasn't no body cams, wasn't none of that stuff. So we've won reforms, we've won small things, but it hasn't impacted the structure, right? But that's why this ground has been so difficult for them to conquer as well. That all of that years, that's 25 years plus fighting this fight.
Just to add to what Alex said, it's an important point too, and I think the administration is keenly aware of that because they studied this community in the same way that during the Civil Rights Movement you had King and the SCLC study Birmingham. The whole reason that SCLC went to Birmingham is they were looking for a victory after they had failed in Albany. The idea is that we want to be in a community where we can anticipate how the leaders will react. They thought Eugene Bull Connor came out of Central Casting. They knew he would behave in a way that would then allow them the opportunity to dramatize what was happening in the South, large writ, through the story of Birmingham. The Trump administration chose the wrong community in terms of how it thought if we break the back of the Twin Cities, then we're going to have this great example that we can tout to everybody else about how we roll, and that'll cow other cities. I don't think they anticipated the depth of resistance here.
Can I just say something to that, because that's so important? Minnesota is so white, right? They did not think white people were going to put their lives on the line for immigrants, right? That's what they thought. When you think about Minnesota, Minnesota has more Fortune 500 companies per capita than any other state, right? They did their analysis, but they did not do it correctly. They did not understand Minnesota's strength. They did not understand Minnesota culture. Even, you know, we've been having these healing circles at Hill, Minneapolis, and one of the conversations came up about Minnesota nice. So you all know, typically we're talking about the microaggressions, we're talking about all the shady things, but they say no, the Minnesota nice is actually what's making us show up for each other, because we know on the surface that we have to see each other at least. We got to recognize each other at least. We got to speak to each other at least, right? And on the surface, people shouldn't be getting pulled out of their homes. People shouldn't be going hungry because they can't leave their homes. Kids shouldn't be getting pulled from school. People shouldn't be dying in broad daylight, especially not white people. Go ahead, brother.
And you all brought me to a point that I was going to come to a little bit later in terms of why us, why now? Because let's also take it from the lens of months before this surge came to our doorstep, they occupied and are occupying Washington, D.C., Chocolate City. Yeah, they occupied and are occupying Memphis, Tennessee. So to come to Minneapolis, Twin Cities, which again, as you say, are predominantly white, but there also is a very strong group of black and brown leaders, boots on the ground, that have been a large part of this resistance for many, many years.
Yeah.
We're sitting at the table with two of the people that helped build those networks that now are being, I think, utilized in a way to push back as part of the central architecture again for this resistance against ICE. So again, I think it was a miscalculation on the part of the administration to assume that those networks couldn't be leveraged and expanded in a way that account for some of the success we've seen on the ground and the discipline that a lot of these demonstrators, because this language that gets used to describe them, rioters and so on, is a misnomer. Demonstrators, protesters, individuals actually pushing back against an unjust policy and unjust law.
Yeah.
And what's happening, real quick, I just want to say, Minnesota is holding the line, right? They say the North remembers, and the North is holding the line and actually being an example, right? And waking, I hope, other white people up to say, hey, this is all of our fights, right? I mean, indigenous people already knew it, brown and black people already knew it. Now, our immigrant brothers and sisters, if they didn't know, they know now more than ever, and white people know. And I'm going to tell you something, as somebody who, I've been in Minnesota since 2014, but I'm from Washington, D.C., and all of my family is there. And I will tell you, the way that they have orchestrated it, they're going in specifically black neighborhoods, impoverished black neighborhoods, right, harassing, and that same harassment is not being happening in the white neighborhoods in D.C. My mom lives on Capitol Hill. My grandmother bought that house in the 60s. The police are nowhere to be found unless they are just patrolling, driving by to make sure it's quiet. Literally, I went from Southeast one night where they were terrorizing these people to Northeast, and it was quiet as a church mouse. I could not believe it. And it just made me think about the fact that when Harriet was enslaved and she got to the North, she said, y'all done got too important. Y'all done got too entitled. Y'all done got too much money, to the fact that y'all are up here sitting, living good with clean clothes and food and everything else while people are enslaved. And so we got to recognize that things are happening at the same time.
Y'all are bringing these conversations because I have a list of like talking points, and I'm like, oh, okay, that's supposed to be here. So we're gonna come back to it because these are very important points that I think that need to be addressed. Going back quickly on the history of this, is this unique to America? Because there's a parallel that obvious people can make to Nazi Germany. Is there an analogy to that time in our history and world history, or is this uniquely American?
The Nazis learned from us. And see, I think this is where we have to, and I'm gonna let my historian
No,
brother,
you
but
go,
I
sister.
love
You
history
doing your
too.
thing. You doing
I
your
love
thing.
history too, though, and I think it's very important. I'll never forget when I was in law school and we had a foundation of justice class, and we were talking about Brown versus Board of Education and talking about like how it was so out of place based on like how our laws traditionally go. But then when you put it in the context of the Cold War and Russia calling America out for its racism and how they treated black people, it's like the hypocrisy. America has been putting makeup on a pig for far too long, and now the pig, which was cute at one point, has become the hog. And hogs get slaughtered, right? America is a beast, a vicious beast, and I would even say, how they say hurt people. In America, the 13 colonies were people who had been hurt and harmed, by Britain for so long, but they became even worse than their oppressors, right? And so what we're seeing right now is, yes, there are parallels, and I'll say, as somebody who was studying in India in 2016 when Trump became president, I was looking at the connection between Hitler and Trump back then. I was also looking at the fact that Gandhi and Hitler lived at the same time, and Gandhi was writing to Hitler. And I will say, I would be that person. I would write to Trump, honestly. And I would tell him, like, your humanity is still on the line as well. And I don't believe that any of us are beyond redemption. And I think that we need to speak to Trump supporters more, because we demonize them in a way of not recognize how they have been abused as well. They have felt isolated as well. And people don't want to hear that all the time, but all I can do is speak truth. Ain't that what you said? We got to speak truth. And the truth is that people ignored them for many years. People weren't paying attention, and what MLK was trying to show us with the Poor People's Campaign is that we are all truly in this together. And so the poor white man don't think that the black man is your enemy, because he's not. And when you look, we actually have more in common than we do difference. And so for me, yes, we can look at the parallels between Nazi and what's happening right now in America, but we also have to look at our history. And that's why they're trying to erase our history. That's why they're trying to get rid of museums. That's why they're trying to get rid of the books, right? Because the writing is on the wall. We just have to look, Brother Harry.
In fact, and we got to get Alex in here, but to your point, because the parallel that people want to make is around the brown shirt. So they look at ICE and they go, this looks like Trump is attempting to establish his own paramilitary group that'll go in and kind of effectuate his policy independent of the law. And certainly some of the things that we've seen in the last year, from the pardoning of the J6 rioters, and that was a riot, to trying to take the handcuffs off the police and saying that you could have, that feels the way that Greg Bovino dressed and approached his community, the optics of it, Christy Nome, and the things that have been written, the symbols that they're leaning into feel that way. But the more concrete is the one that Sister Leslie just raised, and it's important. Hitler had a failed beer hall putsch to take over the German government, and he's imprisoned. And he writes this book, Mein Kampf, which taps into the politics of grievance. And so when I listen to Trump supporters, MAGA, Make America Great, that litany of grievances that they raise is Trump was able to, very Hitler-esque, create a platform that spoke to people's anger and this politics of grievance. And so what we're seeing is, and one of the things that Hitler did in that book is talk about, for example, poked fun at the United States. I heard echoes of this at Trump at Davos last week. Only in certain nations do they train a half-ape to believe that he is a lawyer and allow him to practice law. He was talking about the NAACP. He was talking about black folks. He was talking. So when I hear Trump at Davos say to European nations, you've made a grievous error in terms of your immigration policies, you should be more like us, that's that appeal to white supremacy. It is the optics. Are these parallels that we can look at in terms of like the brown, but then there's also something that I think, in the way that everybody should have read Project 2025, everybody should also read Mein Kampf, because you'll understand a lot of, the J.D. Vance, hillbilly elegy, we got to understand, but there's something in the sense that there's a segment of our society who believe that they have been robbed, and they're willing to destroy and smash all the foundations of the democratic republic, or they'd rather see it destroyed than preserved if it means that they aren't first.
I'm going to add this piece if I can, because I think y'all bodied that. The piece that needs to be acknowledged in all of that is the lack of healing. So what you're watching is generational trauma being played out, right?
Come on.
Leslie just spoke to that. This is generational trauma. This isn't even just going back to Nazi Germany. This is going back to Europe.
Come
right?
on.
Like, this is generational trauma that's showing up here. Mein Kampf, lack of healing. Hillbilly Elegy, lack of healing. Figure out who actually wronged you. Name that. Do your work, right? That's what we saw. The outcome of Floyd, when we talk about Floyd, what's the work that white people need to be doing?
Right.
You got to do your work.
That
and your
part.
work is healing.
That part.
Period.
That part.
You have to be able to heal these fractures
Come on.
that have been existent for generation after generation
That
after
part.
generation, and it's just playing itself out all over again.
That part.
When we
That's
talk
good.
about the lack of healing, what also strikes me is the fact that we had after the Civil War, there wasn't a true reckoning.
Yeah.
We, and by we I mean America did not stamp out the Confederacy. In fact, in many ways, it embraced the Confederacy and allowed it to live and fester. And not even fester, they held positions in government immediately following, quote unquote, Reconstruction and things of that nature.
Yeah, and that feels very similar to what we're watching
That's right.
right now. And I think you're right. This is the reckoning, though, right? This is the reckoning. At least, like here in this city, I think it's national too. But this is the reckoning, right? White folks, are y'all ready to do your work? Are you ready to live into these ideals that y'all talked about, right? And that's a lot of what we're seeing from the right? These people who have decided democracy is not important. This thing's too hard. This experiment's over, right? Because y'all ain't never actually done the work to be a part of that, right? Y'all are used to dictating, being on top, and it ain't worked for y'all, right? And so that has to be repaired. And y'all have to decide, do we believe in this ideal, and are we gonna, even if we don't achieve it, are we gonna keep working towards it or not? I look at it like y'all quit, bro. Like y'all gave up,
Yeah.
right? Y'all gave up on the idea, and now you want to try something else.
That
right?
part.
And to your point, Alex, there's no accountability. So you go back to the Civil War and Reconstruction. The irony of what comes out of the Civil War is the South loses the war, but they win the narrative. And the narrative is that, both sides were honorable and they were both fighting for honorable things. No, there was only one side that was honorable, and that was the side that was fighting for human freedom and dignity, right?
Exactly.
So we then get into a position where we are in a state that had a Lake Calhoun, named after the person who articulated the philosophy that helped to set the foundation for the Civil War. And Leslie was named it so beautifully earlier. The Whipple Federal Building is named for a priest who worked toward the, preserving the lives of those indigenous, but at the same time was here to, evangelize and proselytize them by denying them their very identity and culture.
Yep.
So when Alex says that this just generational trauma is bound up in history and that we have to face that accountability also comes with hearing things like the great replacement theory. You will not replace us. We were never out to replace you, but we're a mirror to your lack of accountability for the things that you profess and you don't live up to.
Now I gotta jump in. It's like basketball. I know, Brother Harry, but I gotta jump in here because I want to kind of redirect us a little bit. And for me, it's not the Civil War. It's the American Revolution, which Professor Okati says was not even a real revolution. It was actually just a war for the independence, right? And that's when this really should have been reconciled, right? When you're fighting for independence and freedoms, for you to still think that there were some human beings that should not be free is a great era, right? And even when we talk about the Civil War, right, like we have to put that into context as well, because I feel like we have been bamboozled. We have been led astray, right? The North lied to us because we never have been free. I think we're just free-ish. If you ask me, we runaway slaves. At least I am. I can't speak for nobody else. And Asada tried to warn us. Asada tried to tell y'all the Nazis are still in the police department. That is who is all in her book.
And that's why I say we never really reconciled with stamping out the Confederacy. We allowed it to fester and come into new names.
And what you said about the Nazis, well, we got to go back to me. 1850 fugitive slave laws have really been coming up in my brain, right? We got to go back to policing being built on slave patrols. We have to remember, we wear your papers, that it is illegal to stand with people who are being oppressed and fighting for their freedom. I was just saying the other day, drapetomania, trying to tell us that we are crazy for fighting for our freedom. Like, we have to stand against these systems that are telling us that human beings are anything less than human. Like, that's how drastic we gotta get. And it can't just be this. The last thing I'm gonna say, I'm gonna give it back to you. But the last thing I wanna say is, even the way that we saw Alex and Renee vilified and being called domestic terrorists, and then it being switched around when we found out that Renee's dad was a Trump supporter, or then when we found out that Alex was an ICU veteran nurse. I don't care if they was drug dealers and strippers, right? We have to care about our humanity no matter what. And that's where we got to draw the line. And we can't lose this moment. Right now, while people are awake and alert, this is a real time for us to reconcile. I was at a strike meeting the other day, right, one of the labor strike meetings, and I said, why is it just white men up here and maybe one white woman? Where's the indigenous, black, Latino, immigrant people? And I did it in a real cute Minnesota nice way that they could digest it. Hey, y'all, for anybody that's watching from that meeting. But it was real and it had to be said. And we got to be willing to speak truth to power. Right. We can't just have the different voices. We got to have some truth in it, Brother Harry. Absolutely,
absolutely. And so I'm going to move the conversation around just a little bit because it led into this. I remember on January 7th when I was walking to cover the vigil for Renee Good. And as I'm walking, there were some people who were in their cars that couldn't pass. And so they're seeing all these people and there was a truck with a couple of brothers in it. And hey man, what's going on? I said, oh, they're having a vigil for the woman who was killed. I'm pretty sure we had known her name by that time, but I said, they're having a vigil for the woman that was killed. And he said, hey man, stay out of that. This ain't our fight. And I hear it too many times. Alex, talk to the fact, or talk to the point of, is this our fight?
Yeah, I get the fun question. It is our fight. 100%. I don't know what camera's on me, but it is our fight. Sorry if you don't feel that way. It's our fight because it's always been our fight. That part. This is not a new system. It's just a different name. I think for the struggle is for our community, we've lived under this, right? I was saying earlier, this is the war on drugs exported and re-imported, right? It was exported, it was perfected in Palestine, right? But all of this started in our community. Surveillance, right? I said earlier, I'm an 80s baby, right? I'm very familiar with crash units, neighbors getting doors kicked in by SWAT teams. This is, right, COINTELPRO, like militarization, mass incarceration, this is all us, right? Like this is what has happened to us, and it's been exported, and now it's coming back. But it's coming back for other people, right? And so, and I think that that's one of the misnomers. You know, we're fighting all, the trick that they're using right now to me is this piece around these abstractions, right? Like we're fighting a forever war. The reason we're fighting a forever war is because we're fighting like terrorism. It's a ghost, right? Anybody could be a terrorist, right? But that happened to us first. Anybody could be a drug dealer, right? Anybody could be happening in any of these houses, right? And now it's anybody could be an illegal, right? And soon anybody can be a domestic terrorist, right? Like it's our fight. Now do we need to be on the front line? That's your choice. I don't recommend black and brown bodies be on the front line right now. But if you feel so inclined, do it. I wouldn't stop you from doing that. But white folks, it's time for y'all to put your bodies on the line. We've been the bodies on the line for 4 centuries, right?
Even the American Revolution.
Yep. We're gonna do the work. We're not just at home. This whole piece around like we're resting. Like some of us are, but like most of us we're doing stuff behind the scenes. I'm doing stuff behind the scenes. I'm supporting things. I'm figure out what that looks like for you, but this is very much our fight. And the reason it is because after they get done deporting whoever they want to deport, they're gonna be right back in our neighborhood. And they're in our neighborhoods now. They was just in North Minneapolis, right? Like they're in our community.
They shot somebody in our neighborhood in North Minneapolis.
Yep.
And Alex lays that out so eloquently because, and I'll go back to the revolution in the way that Leslie talked about it. When the Boston Massacre, we're at the 250th anniversary of the U.S. So when we celebrate the Boston Massacre, they talk about Crispus Attucks. You know, the first man to die, it was a black man.
Black man.
John Adams defended the British soldiers who fired into that crowd, and he described Crispus Attucks and the others who were killed that day as a motley crew of Negroes, mulattoes, Irish Teagues, and Jack Tars. In other words, he was saying to the British, they not like us, right? They not like us. We're different. But then within a very short period of time, when he's aggrieved, when white Bostonians are aggrieved, then all of a sudden they're heroes. And we know this intimately in our community. Leslie mentioned Fugitive Slave Act, same thing. You have a compromise of 1850 because the great conundrum for Southerners coming out of the American Revolution and the adoption of the Constitution is there's no federal slave law. Sound familiar? And so what happens is you got slave catchers going to northern cities and you've got abolitionists or anti-slavery people in those cities going, not quite this is a sanctuary city, but you will not take people off the streets. We want to do that. So when they finally got that law in 1850, that's what brought it to a head because part of what that law said was it criminalized people who would assist escaped slaves and it drafted everybody in the process of returning that curious species of property. Human bodies, literally. Within 10 years, you got a civil war. It was part of the impending crisis. So when Leslie and Alex go back, and I want to name something about Alex in particular, and would love to hear your thoughts on this. In this moment now, there's a lot of conversation about armed self-defense and the fact that Alex Preddy had a gun. Now, this brother does classes for the responsible stewardship of maintaining and having firearm. But that's not new in our community either. And it goes back even before the Black Panthers, right?
Deacons
so
of
the irony,
Defense.
Deacons of Defense for Justice, and black folks have always been hunters and fishermen, right? So this idea that when it is done by people of color, it's a problem. When white folks do it, it's an issue. And when it doesn't get reconciled, it's a civil war. But if you had dealt with us, you never would have got to that point.
And the reason Californians can't carry guns now is because of the Black Panthers.
That's right.
That part. Alex, before you go into the defense part, I wanted to go into something that you were saying earlier. One, I agree with you 100% that it is our issue. And where we disagree just a little bit is not necessarily about the part that you don't got to be on the front lines, because I do think everybody plays a different role, right? We all play a different role. However, people are too comfortable for me. I've always felt like that. I've always felt like we're in a state of emergency. Like years. Like I remember I was working for a federal judge and I was sitting on the floor literally crying, looking at all the police brutality cases I was looking at all the immigrant black people that were coming in and out of the courtroom. I'm like, why is everybody going to work every day? Why is everybody just walking around acting like this is normal and that this is okay? Why are people not outraged enough for me? They never have been, and in this moment, they're still not. And we're getting closer to the point where it's like, I don't know if we're gonna really be able to hold the line before so much further if we don't push it all the way back, right? And so for me, my worry is, so I'll give you all a quick story, Harry. I'm gonna make it quick. But,
we got time.
Okay, period. In 2017, when Justine DeMont was killed, I was the vice president for the Minneapolis NAACP, right? And the Minneapolis NAACP was split. Half of us thought we needed to be out there standing with Justine DeMont in South Minneapolis. The other half felt like this was not our issue. Sound familiar, right? To what we're talking about right now. I was on the side that we had to, because we who believe in freedom cannot rest. That's just not when it involves us. That is our moral high ground. That is who we are as people, like the motherland, Africans. Like we know that everybody is our children, everybody is our cousin. We are all in this together. And the moment that we forget that, we lose our own humanity. And me, for one, I'm not willing to lose my humanity, right? And so I'm gonna always stand up. And I also think that in this moment, we are to be teachers. We've learned a lot. We didn't go first to not teach the lessons, right? It would be selfish, it would be inhumane for us to sit on the sidelines and say, well, this ain't our problem. The audacity. And to be honest, I feel like the same people that would say such a thing are the same people that don't stand up when George Floyd, Jamar Clark, Philando, Thurman Blevins, Justin Tigan, all the other names too. Because I remember being out in the street when Black Lives Matter first started, when I was living in Miami when Trayvon Martin was murdered. And it was black people telling me to get out the street, right? And so there's always this comfortable class. It's a class thing.
That's right.
There's always a comfortable class. And it's getting to the point where people are not so comfortable. And I personally don't want nobody to be comfortable, because when there's anybody dying at the hands of the state, we should care. We should care. We should be outraged. And you know what I say? Don't complain, activate.
That's right.
Yes.
No disagreement for me.
It was more of an and, to your point. It was more of an and than a but. Right.
These are the healthy conversations that we need to have. We need to flesh this out so that we can have a comprehensive strategy. And I'm going to get to that part because I want to know what a strategy is coming out of here. But actually, I'll kind of dovetail into this, Leslie. What are the tactics right now that we see are working? And this isn't necessarily just on the ground tactics. What are the overall tactics that we see where we are working, whether it's within shaping the narrative in media, whether it's our economic, what are those tactics?
So one, even us being here today, right? Like, we already have built community. We know each other, right? Now is not really the time to be, I mean, you can get to know people, right? But however, when you're in the middle of this crisis, it's like we need to already have those relationships. As Brother Alex said, healing is really, really important. You know, I was in such the fight mode when Brother George Floyd was murdered, but what God really revealed to me is that we have to heal in order to build. So I started a community healing team, and you know, I've been holding healing spaces over North Minneapolis. It's so important. People want and need a space to activate and to talk to their neighbors and to talk about what's going on. In addition to that, mutual aid. The way that we've been showing up for each other, the way that we've been feeding each other, housing each other, covering each other, protecting each other. And again, this is ancient. You know what I mean? Like, this is who we are and who we've always been. This is the Underground Railroad that really has been being activated, and that is necessary in order to keep the fight going. Again, those over 50,000 people that showed up last Friday is how we are gaining territory and how we are winning. People are willing to sacrifice. It's going to take some sacrifice, right? It's going to take some being uncomfortable, right? We've been doing a lot right, and I can't wait till we can talk about more that we can be doing right. But those are just a couple examples.
I would just throw in too that the new way is the old way.
Come
right?
on.
Like,
come
we got to
on.
get back
That's
to
good.
what we've been doing.
That's
It's-
good.
Like, how we've survived all this time is by taking care of each other.
That's
It's
good.
we make it so complicated. Just take care of each other.
That part.
And as a community, we know what we need to do to
Right.
take care of each other.
That part.
And that's it. And I think you've seen a amazing example here in Minneapolis
Yeah.
of what that looks like.
Yeah.
Through Floyd and now. It hasn't been without problems. We're not going to get into all of that now.
Right.
But like, that's what it's about. How do we take care of each other? Whatever you need, how do I provide that? And I would say, if you're late to the bandwagon figuring out who your community is, that's fine.
That's okay.
Mutual
right.
aid. I don't, you know, who are the people that are going to support you,
Yeah.
though, right? And that's what you need to be figuring out. I've been saying, who are your people, right? And so I have my people. I know who my people are.
That's
And
good.
what are we doing to make sure that everybody has their people,
That's
right?
good.
Is this the time now, too, to know the neighbor that you don't know,
Yes.
right? We ain't got to be, that's the one thing I've seen is like, and where I think earlier we talked about where they underestimated things.
Right.
I think this is true of everywhere, but particularly here. Nobody's gonna tolerate you coming into their neighborhood, messing with their people.
Right.
That's just it's a fundamental
Facts.
truth to me. Like we're not just gonna let you come in here and do that to nobody.
You know, like in the black family where they be like, we can play with each other, but you can't come from the outside playing with us. That's what it reminds you of.
I love that. And I have to ask you to say this, brother, because you said it earlier and it struck me. You also talked about the importance of guarding and protecting and amplifying joy. Like, show up for the fight, but can you speak on that?
You want me to speak on it now or later?
Well,
I'm sorry.
No, I want to hold that because that's really where I want to end the conversation. I want to bring that conversation to the joy at the end. So hold on to it because I want to get there. To what you just spoke on in terms of what is old is new, I think tend to forget that one woman, it was really two, but the one that we coalesced behind decided in Montgomery, Alabama, she wasn't going to give up her seat. And the community got behind this woman and they boycotted, but it wasn't, and this is what frustrates me with some of today's movements. like there's going to be a boycott on tomorrow, Friday the 30th, and this tape will air post. But one day of a boycott doesn't say much to me. The community of Montgomery, Alabama boycotted for a year. And I think that, so I frame that to say, are there conversations right now about sustained boycotts? And in fact, I think today is the anniversary of one sustained boycott, which is the boycott of Target for rolling back their DEI.
And it's interesting because not only is it the kind of remembrance or anniversary of the boycott for Target, I was looking at my Facebook today, 6 years ago today, we were also standing up for Mayan Burrell. So I don't know what it is about January 29th, right? But it's something there. The thing that I wanted to say in terms of, so I was at the labor and strike meeting that they had, and I did end up speaking and saying something. And I will tell you, some of the strategy I think is building the momentum. I think that they know that it would be better to have a strike every day, but you kind of have to build the muscle, especially when you have so many people that are not used to striking at all. And so it seems like, they're building it up. Okay. So I will say, and this is where trust matters, right? But again, if I wasn't in that room, I wouldn't even have that to share, which is why I would tell them representation matters, because we got to have it where it's like I trust it. Of like, even if I'm not there, okay, well, Leslie's in the room. Somebody I know is your people. Somebody that you know is in the room, and you got to trust that, like, okay, there's some bigger things going, which to me brings me to my next point of like communication. I do think that communication piece is really critical, because the same way that we were abandoned by Target a year ago, and they tried to say, well, no, we're not really abandoning you. But it's like, well, one, you should have communicated that. But also a year later, we see that you did, in fact, abandon us, right? And we feel abandoned. Not just by Target, but all the 60 companies that wrote their letter and couldn't even include ICE out. That was very simple. They could have hired me. I would have told them. Literally, y'all could still fix it. Y'all could still fix it. All 60 y'all sign up again and say ICE out. That ain't that complicated. Don't make it.
And I think the fear drives that, because they're worried about the retaliation from the government. But the problem is, and we know the Trump administration has targeted corporations. We know that he's demanded and extorted corporations in the same way that he's extorted politicians. The problem is, at some point, moral abstraction won't help you. We're already under assault. So there's no need to play the game that we have to appease the person who is already, or the administration is already behaving in a way that is stripping people of their constitutional rights and denying just the fundamental things, attributes we associate with human dignity. The other thing is, and Leslie and I spent a lot of time talking about this in 2020, the difference between a mass organizing and a mass mobilizing movement. So this is, it sounds academic, but it's actually quite important. We're now in a moment where mass mobilizing is where people feel most comfortable.
That part.
Can I get 2,500 people to show up tomorrow at X location? And if I get those 2,500 people to show up, check mark, victory. Leslie's and Alex are organizers. So for them, it's like, no, I don't need you to show up tomorrow. I need to know what we're going to do beyond tomorrow, so that we're building this connective tissue, so that if we have a list of demands, and that's your point about Montgomery, it wasn't mass mobilizing. You had Joanne Robinson and other women in that community who worked along with Edie Nixon and Dr. King to put together and organize this boycott. And they were like, we're going to stay off the buses as long as it takes. And they had the organizational structure, smaller community, much more, to be able to do that, as they were also pursuing other channels. So it wasn't just the organizing and boycotting the bus, but exploring judicial channels and legal, so on and so forth. Today, we have people who are far more familiar and comfortable with mass mobilizing. It's easier to show up, and I don't mean this as a critique, and say, I was there, I was at the march, take my selfie, get my button, and go home.
Yeah.
Or post on Facebook and, bring back our girls, and I've done something. And what we need are to lean into organizations and individuals who've done organizing. Last thing I'll say is, there is a model of charismatic leadership that we all grew up on, where the leader was Martin Luther King. 9 people speak at the March on Washington, but the leader was Martin Luther King. They all represented organizations, including A. Philip Randolph, the conservative at that point, NAACP, the Urban League, so on and so forth. So our model of charismatic leadership, again, gets us into trouble, because what we're looking for is, where's the king? Where are our leaders? When in fact, our water are our leaders. Like as Alex and Leslie were talking about, and again, I learned this as a historian, I teach this. I learned this concretely in 2020 in the Floyd protests, because what happened is people naturally found where they were comfortable to contribute, and those organizing bodies were able to connect you and link you in and let you in your lane, be part of that contribution, do that. I think in our present moment, at least in terms of the pushback against ICE, this disconnect between building an organizational movement as opposed to mobilizing is going to be critical in terms of a sustainable, long-term pushback against what the administration is doing.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think, like, just to name it, I think, like, generationally, I think there's coming out of the Occupy movement, there's been a lot of reluctance on the part of younger organizers to embrace models of leadership that are hierarchical. And while I get that, that's also, we can't create organizations that way.
Yeah,
and so what you have here is a bunch of networks that are doing great work. Yeah. But I think it's a failure coming out of Floyd that there's not an organization. It doesn't have to be a sole one, but how do we don't even have a coalition, right? That's like, hey, this is everybody at the table, right? And that's the difference between mobilizing and organizing. We have to be organized where we have coalition, we have principles of unity. These are the things that we're working under. And that's where you get to the work of the day-to-day discipline. And you're not gonna do that with a flat model.
No, 100%.
It's just the reality.
No, and can I just say something to what you're saying? One, to what both of y'all are saying, I've been saying what we need more than anything is organizing. We need organizing. I've been going to like the visual and the memorials, and it's like dead silence, right? People are showing up there because they want to do something. They don't know what to do. So I'm like teaching people how to chant. I ain't never think I'd be in the space I had to teach people how to chant. Like literally, and I'm like really activating them in this space, right? And then Pimento, shout out to Tommy, and I've been telling everybody to support local businesses. We need to do that. They were trying to bring out some hot dogs. The police gonna tell them they can't bring out no hot dogs. I said, why y'all listening to the police about anything? Because again, they're not organizing though, so it's no activation. I said, and they really almost ignited something in me because I said, we'll shut it all down. Let me tell you something. I make a couple phone calls and I'll get this whole, what y'all scared is gonna happen will really happen if y'all keep playing. But what I realized is like, wow, there is no leadership, right? Like there is no leadership. And I think for a lot of us, we've like kind of shifted the leadership. But as I've been sitting in these healing circles that I've been hosting every day since Sunday, the people are saying that, the young people are saying that, like, we need leadership. We're looking for leadership. And I think it's important because, again, we don't need a king or a queen, but we do naturally need leaders. We need, and we need experience, and we need the wisdom.
Yeah, and we need a tangible ask.
Which I got some ideas about that.
Let me know.
And your leader then is the spokesperson for that. But our fear now in this moment of being disappointed by a human being. And I think that grows out of our interrogation of the character of some of the people who've been at the forefront of social justice movements, who then, once we know them intimately, we're disappointed that Dr. King was, had his challenges with women. But then if you, my colleague Michael Long and I just did the young readers adaptation of Jonathan Ives' Pulitzer Prize winning book on Martin Luther King. It's important for young people to know Martin Luther King struggled with mental health issues. He was a human being. People aren't perfect because they do the work. They get up and do the work in spite of being imperfect.
And he was 39.
He was 39 years old.
And as somebody who's 33, Jesus year, the year he transcended, I just want to say really quick that being a leader is a thankless job.
That's right.
I did an interview, or I was a part of a press conference in 2020 that went viral. Right before I did that press conference, I got a text from an activator in the community that said I need to step down as being president for the Minneapolis NAACP because they were upset that I was saying we shouldn't be blaming the young people. And I was saying it's not the young people that's burning these buildings. They are not professionals. They're not the ones that could do this. And I was right, by the way. However, this person was upset about it. Then you fast forward, look at Nakima and Chantel and them putting, again, their lives on the line to really expose not only the director of ICE in St. Paul, but I would say it was almost like a unmasking of a KKK grant. Anyways, I'm not going to go there, but what I just want to say is...
And for our listening audience, because we're throwing names out, Nakimi Levy Armstrong, Chantel Allen, recently arrested for a church protest in St. Paul, and charged unfathomably with an act that was used to historically go after the Ku Klux Klan. So,
And both longtime activists who, for a national audience, just got introduced to them, but as Alex and Leslie were pointing out, particularly in the case of Nekima, at least in terms of folks in a leadership position, has been in the work, and we can all note moments over the last 10, 15 years when Nekima has been at the forefront of important conversations.
I met her during the Trayvon Martin protests way back on the steps at the University of Minnesota.
Just real quick to wrap up the point that I was making is, where is the protection and covering for those leaders? Do you get what I'm saying? And it's not there most of the time. Wasn't we just talking about it earlier? It's like the catching. And as somebody who's been in the front, I will tell you, I be hesitant to step in the front. Dr. Yohuru, I don't be wanting to be in the front. And I do feel like God is pushing me more and more. I'm like, really? Like, do I have to? Like, you know, because it's thankless, it's exhausting,
it's dangerous,
it's tiring, it's dangerous. I've been closer to being shot in the movement than I ever was in the inner city of DC, and that says a lot.
But you also made the case in 2021 that people need a sabbatical.
Yeah.
That you actually have to heal from the work if you're going to be at the forefront of the work. One of the things that I appreciated about your advocacy and leadership in that moment, because you were holding people accountable in a lot of spaces. And so there's this also the uncomfortability of being the person who has to name. At the same time, people are aiming and taking shots at you because without that, as Alex described it, coordinating principles, guiding principles, guardrails, foundations, people start to drift and they lose the thing that brings us together. The thing that brings me together is not that you were on CNN last night and I wasn't. What brings me together is that if you're amplifying the message, we're in a good place.
Yeah.
And I promise you, the last thing I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna pass it back to you, but on a serious note, I started a GoFundMe for these healing circles because we've been paying for the food and the space and the facilitation. It's like at $1,500, Dr. Yohuru. People don't want to fund the healing. People don't want to support, and again, trust the leadership that I know what we need right now, and this is what we need right now. But that's another conversation, I guess, for another day. Go ahead.
Well, we're gonna have another day to have another conversation. So that's that I'm speaking that into existence. We brought up several minutes ago and you were talking about healing. How do we find or create joy within the midst of this chaos?
Yeah, I'll take the lead on that. I think one, it's creating space for connection, meaning like get together with people. You know, fellowship is what fills the cup.
And also, I'm gonna hop in real quick.
Yeah.
Why is it important that we have the joy?
Yeah, I mean, that's what's going to keep you going. Leslie just talked about how hard this work is. Like, I know I burnt out in my 20s doing work. Like, and if you're going to be doing this work, you're probably going to burn out multiple times, right? So, like, you do have to, like, after you do all this stuff, you got to find a way to, like, have some joy. You got to, whatever that looks like for you, you have to carve out that space for you. But I think collectively what we can do is what I call kind of like witnessing, right?
Yeah.
Like I bring people together with the work that I do with educators, and I think what's valuable is what I call kind of mirror time, right? Like you need to see somebody who understands you, right? And so for educators sitting down, and we know the common struggle, right? And that's what fills the cup. I don't have to do any extra explaining here, right? I don't have to like be anything that I'm not. I don't have to perform in this space at all. I can just show up and be who I am, and we know we're gonna laugh. We know we're gonna have a good time when we get together, right? And we're also gonna talk about this stuff. And we might cry around that stuff too, but we do know that we're gonna experience some joy in there. We're gonna leave with our cups full. 100%. And I think that's why it has to be there. That's what's gonna keep you going. And I see it again and again and again. Even in this time where we're still doing these remote Zoom calls and stuff. And when I get the call, oh, it's in person. But like when people leave that in-person meeting, everybody always, man, I'm glad I came, right? I'm glad I came because I feel better, right? Yeah, because at home you alone. You isolated and you don't I get energy from you. I get energy from you. I'm going to be good for the rest of the week, right? Like after being here having this conversation, and that's the point, right? That's the point.
Two things that I would say. So after Renee was killed, I actually facilitated a virtual healing circle for educators in Minneapolis public schools. And when they joined the call, I always do a check-in word, check-out word, right? So when they joined the call, they were fatigued. They were discouraged, they felt heavy, they felt alone, they felt lost, they felt like they didn't have direction. When they left the call, they felt healed, they felt lifted, they felt supported. It was a lot of tears from a lot of people. They were seen, right? Then shifting after the death of Alex on Sunday, immediately I started hosting in person. Because to your point, you got to escalate it and take it to the next level. The more it gets taken to the next level, and we've been feeding them. We've had a safe space for them to be. So many people said they just wanted to be in community, that they just needed to see each other. Our forever Chief Rondo was there last night. Brother Muhammad over Touch, a violent interrupter, showed up. Louis Blaze, Juice Lord, Benny Crooks, musicians have been showing up, artists, different people from different organizations, young people as young as 14 and 17 and 19.
Artists who we need to shout out and elevate the artists, because art is a part of the movement that doesn't. Yeah, it's part of the joy and the movement.
Tish Jones,
yes,
True Art Speaks,
absolutely.
all of the artists. But it's just been a collective, and again, of indigenous, Indian, white, black, you name it. That's who's been showing up. And again, shameless plug, support the work. Leslie E. Redmond, look it up. Go to the GoFundMe, support it, because I shouldn't have to beg people to help and fund the healing, because healing is important. We need the joy, we need the spaces, and people like me that are willing to lead and create it. Where's the catching? Where's the supporting? Amen. I rest my case.
I'm going to say something very quickly, just two things that tie to what has already been shared. One is, my grandfather was a gardener. And one of the things that we would do is when he come to the end of the season, he would have to go through this process of covering the soil.
Come on.
And it was about protecting the soil for the next harvest, because we can't assume in the winter of our discontent that there isn't going to be a spring.
Come on.
And if you don't protect the ground, the seed, right? And it's not fun work. You got to wade through manure. You got to put it down. It's very hard work, but in anticipation of what will grow out of what you do to protect those gains. We are in not a harvest moment, but in a protection moment. So we've got to protect the soil. We've got to protect the gains. We've got to protect the networks. We've got to protect the relationships. We have to do so with the anticipation that a second spring is coming. But when it comes, we also have to do so with the anticipation that we can't go back and grow the same crop again.
That's good.
Because part of this was also crop rotation. We grew peas, but they're very, they take a lot out of the soil. So when we come back, we got to have imagination enough to say, let's plant something else so we can keep the soil fertile.
That's good.
In the process of reimagining what we can be, we can't become blinded to trying to preserve what we were. And as MAGA looks at this as an opportunity to destroy, we can, if we open it up to the artists, to the dreamers, right, to the poets, right, to the songwriters, to the musicians, to the activists, to help us, to the historians, right? We love to tell warriors when they get on a plane, thank you for your service, but we never care the caregivers. If we open up a world of imagination to them, maybe we can reimagine this enterprise to be something that works for all of us.
That's good.
The only last words I can offer after that wonderful way to take us out of this is thank you all for being a part of not only this podcast, broadcast, and radio cast, but being a part of the movement. We appreciate you. I say it on record and off record. We appreciate you and we need you. You are valued and you are all loved as a part of this community here in the Twin Cities. Hopefully we can have continued conversations, and as we move the conversation forward, they are less tense because we're in a moment where we're seeing our victories being realized. Alex, Leslie, Yohuru, Dr. Williams, Leslie Redmond, attorney, activist, frontliner, Brother Alex Leonard, who I know as an educator, as a friend, as a fellow lover of hip hop. I thank you all for being with us.
Oh, and please support independent journalism. Thank you.
That part.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
100%.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and to that point, I also want to make sure that we thank a couple of people who made this possible. Becca Gilbuena of Black Press, who produced and put this entire show together. We're in the studios of Speak Minneapolis, Rebecca Smith, and the entire crew here at Speak Minneapolis. We appreciate everything that you all are doing to continue to tell the truth of our community. So thank you.
United,